Online video communication, no matter how many times I see it, I always feel like I'm living in the future. When I was younger, every movie or TV show trying to depict the future would have flying cars and video communication. Throughout my lifetime, I've been able to watch the technology get better and the industry grow. There are so many providers of it now. Almost every company that you would expect to have their own service has their own service. Google, Apple, Microsoft, Cisco, Facebook, that is some tough competition, not to mention all the others that aren't attached to a larger company, notably Zoom. In one of the most competitive industries out there, they've been able to not only break into it, but actually rise toward the top. In almost any article I could find that ranks these services, Zoom is always included and often high up on the list. So I'm gonna take a look at what makes them special, how this relatively new startup company has risen to become a leader in their industry. The first reason I have for their success is that growing market. Think of it this way, as long as there's new customers out there, people or businesses using video communications for the first time, you don't have to wrestle them away from a competitor, you just have to attract them in the first place, which is much easier. There's plenty of fish swimming around in the ocean, they just need to be effective in baiting them in. They entered this market at a great time. It was right when the demand for these services was accelerating and everyone was starting to respond to it. The company was founded in April of 2011, oddly enough, initially called Saspy. Good call in ditching that name, in my opinion. Thankfully, they soon changed it to Zoom Communications and then ultimately to Zoom Video Communications. But look at that timing. It was less than a year after Apple launched their FaceTime app and less than 1 month before Microsoft announced that they were willing to pay $8.5 billion for Skype. It has been growing consistently over that last decade, specifically during this whole social distancing thing in 2020. People need to stay away from each other, but they still need to communicate, so this is the perfect answer. I'm guessing that many people watching this first used or even heard of Zoom during that time. Much like what happened before, the market grew and they were able to capture part of it. Look at this, their number of customers that have 10 or more employees has more than tripled during the 3-month period ending April 30th, 2020. As a result, their revenue saw a massive jump along with their income. Probably the most noticeable effect would be their stock price. As of June 2020, it has grown from $68 to well over $200. It is very unclear whether or not it'll stay at those heights or fall back down to earth, but the point is that over the last decade, specifically in 2020, the market has grown and that's been good for Zoom. My second reason for their success is simply having a good leader. His name is Eric Yuan. Zoom comes from his vision. He was the one who founded the company and he's been the CEO ever since. I would say he was maybe the perfect person to start this type of business. He's originally from China. That's where he went to college to study math and computer science. He claims that he got the start of the idea for Zoom when he was in college in the 1980s. To visit his girlfriend, who is now his wife, he was forced to take a 10-hour train ride. Understandably, he hated it and spent some of that time thinking that there must be a better way to do this. The thought stayed in the back of his mind for a while. Then in the 1990s, the internet was emerging, and many people, including Eric Yuan, believed that it had some major potential. He attended the speech from Bill Gates that got him all amped up, and he decided that he needed to come to America, Silicon Valley, and become part of it. A famous example of his determination is when he applied for an American visa. At first, he was denied. This happened 9 times over the next year and a half before it was finally granted. He just kept applying and did not accept no for an answer, which I think is a good quality for a leader. Despite not really speaking English, his skills were strong enough to land a job as a software developer at a very small company at the time called WebEx. He was one of their first dozen employees, but they soon became known for their communication services. The company grew so large that in 2007, they were acquired by Cisco for over $3 billion. When that happened, Eric Yuan became their vice president of engineering, where he was in charge of the 800-person department that dealt with this communication software. It sounds like he was living out his dream here, but the issue was he didn't like their service. I don't know the technical details behind it, but if you had a slow connection or too many people were on there, it wouldn't work right, and he just thought that it could be so much better. Their customers were complaining, and I don't know if WebEx or Cisco cared as much as they should have, because their attention always seemed to be elsewhere. I think Eric felt ignored, and finally he said that he had enough. In a very risky career move, he quit his high-paying executive position to start his own competing company. When he was forming it, he thought back to those train rides and thought back to the complaints that he was hearing from the WebEx customers, and he set out to form a service with the customer in mind. That's my next reason. Zoom has always been very customer-oriented. It is known for being simple to use, having all the desired features set up in an intuitive way. They just put out a good product. For years now, Eric had heard people complain about messed up videos and bad connections, so Zoom developed something that can operate at a 40% connection loss. He knew exactly what was wrong with all of the existing services and set out to make something that would improve upon those issues. From the beginning, it was famously made for video communications, not developed from some older existing software that was intended for just text or voice like so many of the others are, so it's optimized for that purpose. And of course, they offer 24/7 customer service. Even Eric Yuan himself would be involved in it. In the early days, when it was still manageable, he would personally email every customer who canceled the service. I'd be interested to hear if your experience differs, but Zoom generally has some of the best customer satisfaction ratings out there. It makes people want to keep using it and gives the company a positive image. When you compare that to all of the complaints that people have had about Skype or whatever else Microsoft has been offering, it starts to make sense why so many people have been gravitating towards Zoom. My next reason behind their success is they've made it easily accessible to their customers. If you want to use their product, it does not take much. If anyone emails you an invite, you can attend a meeting without even creating an account. And even if you do create an account so you can better use the service, it's free. If you want to attract thousands or millions of people to your business, I can't think of anything more effective than giving away your product for free. And that free service is not that bad. Host up to 100 participants, unlimited meetings, though you do have that 40-minute time limit. But hey, if you need longer meetings or more people, you can look at their paid services, which is where they start making money. They charge $15 or $20 a month per host, depending on the plan, which I would say is pretty competitive. And that is in addition to all of these other services that they offer that are trying to meet people's needs. And they have been targeting larger and larger companies. In 2019, they had 344 customers that paid them over $100,000, which is considerably higher than the years before it. Those customers now make up 30% of all their revenue. My final reason behind their success is that they've always secured enough money to continue running the business. This may not sound like that big of a deal, but for a startup company entering such a competitive market, it can be hard to find investors. But Zoom was able to find them, partially for the reasons that I already mentioned. It was a solid, well-liked product that was ran by someone like Eric Yuan. In the very beginning, to get things off the ground, a good portion of their funding actually came from former WebEx executives that had worked with Eric and had faith in him. Notably Dan Scheinman, who personally contributed $250,000. And once they got started, they kept going back for more rounds of funding, higher amounts each time. They were essentially selling off ownership of the company so they could have enough money to keep building. And I should make it clear that there were no profits coming in for a while, but investors kept buying it based on the long-term plan and perceived future potential. In January of 2017, for that series of funding, they were given a $1 billion valuation. That is not usual. It's commonly called a unicorn when they reach that milestone without any public offerings. But then, the thing is, in 2019, they did have a public offering. I don't know how many people were aware of it, because it was on April 18th, which happened to be the same day as the IPO for Pinterest. But it did really well. It was priced at $38 per share, valuing the company at $9.2 billion. And then after one day of trading, it was up to $62 per share, which was a value of $16 billion. And I would like to point out that the stock market valuation has since increased to over $60 billion. Pretty much anyone who has ever invested in Zoom at any point before this stage has made a very good return on their investment. And that includes Eric Yuan. He owns something like 22% of the company, which now makes him one of the richest people in the world, giving him a net worth of $10 billion. Here's the way that I like to look at it. Eric Yuan has a long history of hating travel, stemming at least as far back as those train rides in China in the 1980s. When he quit his job at WebEx to start his own company, he said that he promised his wife that he would limit himself to 2 business trips a year. That is not much for the CEO of a billion-dollar company, but amazingly, he has mostly stuck to that promise. He may be one of the most frequent, loyal Zoom users there is. I just think it's cool that he disliked traveling so much that he dedicated his life to creating something that would help him avoid it. I admire how he turned all of these negatives into a positive. If his girlfriend in China had lived closer, or if WebEx had designed a better product, I don't think Zoom would exist today. So those are my reasons behind their success. Eric Yuan identified a growing market and applied his passion and experience into creating a customer-oriented, highly accessible service. Because of that, they've been able to attract investors and steadily grow into a multi-billion-dollar industry leader. And then on top of that, in 2020, when the demand reached unexpectedly high levels, they were in a position to take advantage of it. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of Zoom as a product? In your experience, has it lived up to those high reviews, or is there another service that you think is better? Of course, it depends on what you're using it for, but for any purpose, how do you rank it among the others? Also, do you agree with my reasons behind their success, or is there something I'm failing to mention? This company has been growing fast, and with so much going on, it can be easy to overlook something. And what do you see for Zoom in the future? Have they been permanently bumped up to this level, or are they going to crash or level off somewhere in the middle? So any thoughts you have about Zoom, whether it's the product or the company, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.